Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and today I'm reviewing this, a Porsche 911 Turbo S. And I'm genuinely excited because I finally get a chance to experience the latest version of this powerhouse. I'll be covering all the details regarding the engine componentry and also some of the other mechanics, some daily drivable practical features, and also taking it for a quick drive. So without further ado, let's get started with this review of the Porsche 911 Turbo S. Just gotta hang on. Wow. All right, so let's get started with the review by first thanking Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to this absolutely stunning Turbo S today. If you happen to be interested in this car or any other new or pre-owned Porsche product, make sure you give them a call. I've left all their information in the description below. Now, let's start the review off with the looks department, and in the turbo trim level, you get a wider front and rear track, which gives it this really muscular, very aggressive look. As a part of active aerodynamics, it has a front rubberized spoiler which deploys based on driving conditions and what mode you're in. Then moving to the side, you have the signature turbo air inlets, and out the back, this really cool looking active aerodynamic wing that works with that front spoiler. But let me tell you where my favorite angle of the Turbo S is. It's right here in the rear quarter panel where you see the big air inlets and the wide fender arches covering these beautiful looking wheels with just the right amount of gap in between the body and the tire. And to top it off, you see a slight glimpse of the taillight peeking out at you. It is absolutely gorgeous, and as you can probably guess, I really like the way this Turbo S looks. All right, so speaking of powerhouses, let's go ahead and talk about this motor. So this is a 3.8 liter twin turbocharged boxer 6-cylinder making 640 horsepower and 590 pounds-feet of torque. It's mated to an 8-speed double clutch PDK transmission, and it's putting power down to all 4 wheels. Now, this thing is on the heavier side as far as 911s. It's 3,636 pounds. But none of that matters because listen to some of these numbers. 0 to 60 time of 2.6 seconds, of course, when you're using launch control. But this number is actually a little underrated because I've read that others have been able to get it in the low 2-second range. But think about that for a second. In Porsche fashion, underrated at 2.6 seconds. 2.6 seconds underrated. It's truly mind-boggling, and the astonishing numbers don't stop there. Top speed of 205 miles an hour. Now, I know not a lot of people care about top speed, but anytime you get a factory car with a warranty with a top speed of over 200 miles an hour, it is truly remarkable and a commendable feat for Porsche. Quarter mile time, 10.5 seconds, and this thing pretty much traps close to 140 miles an hour. It's truly astonishing the numbers that this Turbo S is able to put down with just 640 horsepower, and just use the Porsche horsepower figure here. Now, one other thing this thing has is the optional sport exhaust system. So I'll take you around back and take a listen to what this thing sounds like. Alright, so there you had a chance to get a dose of the Turbo S's exhaust. There's more of that to come during the driving portion of the review. But now let's switch over and talk about some of the other mechanical components from the wheels, tires, brakes, and suspension. Now, because this is the Turbo S trim level and essentially top of the line sans some of the GT trim level models, but that means you get more standard features that would be optional in the lower 911 trim levels. Things like a PASM Sport, which give you a lower ride height. And of course, there's the Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus, rear wheel steering, PDCC, Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control, Sport Chrono, dynamic engine mounts, and of course, the active aerodynamics that generate 375 pounds of downforce in their most aggressive setting. And this car is actually equipped with the front axle lift as well. Now switching to the wheels, these are absolutely gorgeous. These are the optional wheels. They're center locks and they're painted in this black color that gives this spec a very Batman looking 911 Turbo S. The wheels themselves are 20 inches up front by 9.5, 21 inches by 12 in the rear. The tires that wrap them, 255s up front, 315s in the rear, so a nice meaty rear tire. And then the brakes, they're carbon ceramics as standard, 16.5 inches up front with a 10-piston caliper. In the rear, 15-inch brakes with a 4-piston caliper. So Porsche is definitely not messing around with this Turbo S. I mean, you're getting 16.5-inch brakes, carbon ceramics with 10-piston calipers. And I'll give you an idea of how all of this translates to the actual driving during the driving portion of the review. But now let's take a second and jump onto the interior. I'll tell you what it's like in there and give you some of the other practical features of this 911. Alright, so now the interior of the Turbo S, and as a part of the Turbo S trim level, you get some additional bits here. So first things first, it's a all leather interior as standard, and you get some carbon fiber pieces here on the dash and on the steering wheel, around here, and also around your cup holder. So this is a differentiating factor from the lower trim levels, even though you can get them as optional in that one. They come standard in here. But let's touch on the quality and the design, and this pretty much is, not pretty much, it's basically identical to a lower trim level in the 911s. But that's not a bad thing, because I absolutely love how the 911 interior design is so simple, and it's almost perfect as a modern 911. You've got all the technology built in, and the way the design flows with the 4-pod gauge cluster and the RPM in a analog tachometer in the center gauge, and the way the infotainment system is just blended into the dash and it just flows so nicely is really, really nice in a day where manufacturers are just trying to build in or design in flair just to make the interior look better. I really appreciate how Porsche is keeping it simple, keeping it clean on the interior. So as far as a design perspective, I really like it. And quality, because this is the 911 Turbo S trim level, the upgraded leather looks fantastic. A lot more soft touch here, and you get a padded knee rest here next to the PDK transmission controller, and it just looks really, really nice. Very upscale feel and build quality in the Turbo S. All right, so now let's switch on over into the size and overall comfort. So I'm 5'11", and I have several inches of headroom on top of me or above my head, and somebody several inches taller than me would be able to fit in here. My seat is not even on the lowest setting. I would say somebody 6'2", 6'3" will easily be able to fit in the Turbo S. As far as the seats go and how comfortable they are immensely comfortable. But something interesting about this spec specifically. Now, the Turbo S comes standard with the 18-way seats, and the 18-way seats are extremely comfortable. But whoever spec'd this car decided, for whatever reason, that they wanted the 14-way seats. So this car is equipped with the 14-way seats. And nothing against the 14 ways, they're very comfortable as well. It's a proper daily driver's seat that has that dual capability of kind of flipping a switch and becoming an aggressive seat. You have the side bolstering and all of the aggression that kind of holds you in. So the thigh support is actually quite aggressive as well, even without any expansion. But this thing does come standard with heated and cooled seats. Now, let's switch over into technology. You have two 7-inch screens out in front of you, and like I said, you have the analog tachometer. This is pure brilliance from Porsche. I love the way how they balance the technology with some of the analog and the tachometer dead center. It's fantastic. The only thing, of course, you can't see the outer gauge pod clusters for, what is it, your time there and your gas and some of the temperature readings, the turbo PSI reading. But I don't know what they're going to do about that. It's a problem in the 911, not so much in some of the other Porsche products. And then into the infotainment system. So this is a 10.9-inch screen. It's basically the same screen that you've seen in 992, 911s all along. But what's the difference here? For the 2022 model year, Porsche decided to simplify PCM, or the infotainment system, in the 911s. And I saw this for the first time in the GTS that I drove, and I gotta say it is quite simpler than the prior version of PCM. Not that that was complicated, it just, the learning curve in here is a lot shorter. Everything is just simply laid out. It's just almost black and white when you look at it from the main screen, and you read it from left to right. You have the ability to move the icons to the top, so those top icons are actually larger and easier to push on and easier to see. So basically you just move everything that you use frequently to that top line, and you don't have to mess with anything. That's always a wonderful feature. There are separate widget menus when you scroll over to the right and to the left, and the shortcut keys running along the left side of the screen are also very, very helpful. Now, the rest of this is basically 911 flair. So if you've sat in a 911 before, it's basically the same thing. You get some extra buttons because this is a Turbo S top of the line trim level. Otherwise, it's the same thing. Now, some of the other amenities in here: charging. So you have two USB Type-C outlets in the center compartment area here, which is great, one for each occupant in this car. And then as far as storage goes, now the 911 is specifically in the Turbo S because this is quote unquote a GT 911, even though it's the top of the line and it's got the most horsepower. You've got plenty of storage space in the front. Obviously you have several, I believe it's 4 cubic feet, and in the rear you can fold down these rear seats, and there's actually quite a bit of room back there, 9 cubic feet. So combines for 13 cubic feet of space in your 640 horsepower 911. So quite accessible to use on a daily basis. Maybe that's why these 911s are so frequently used as daily drivers. But that's basically it on the interior. Now let's move to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing feels like behind the wheel. All right, so now the driving portion of the review, and as always, this is what the key looks like. There's nothing special about it. It just is in the shape of a 911. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Now, as far as the visibility goes, fantastic. Out the front, no issues. The sides, no issues. Blind spot monitoring. Out the rear, no problem. No wing back there to block your view. And the camera system in here is actually fantastic as well. Full 360 degrees. The side view cameras, it just really, really nicely put together as far as the camera system goes in this car. So, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and go for a quick drive. Start stop on the left, or ignition on the left, because there is no start stop button. Fires up, just sounds like a normal 911 with the Boxer 6-cylinder. The tone in the GT cars is a little different, but I think that's to be expected. So now let's turn the AC on. It's a little hot today. And let's see what this Turbo S has got. The nav keeps asking me to do a setup, but I don't want to do that. Okay, so let's get going. So one of the things I wanted to say, it feels nice to be in a 911. I hadn't driven one of these in quite some time, and just the overall feel of driving a 911, the way you sit in it, and the visibility and the driving position, it's something right up my alley, and it works so well for me. It's a very pleasurable driving experience. Now, let's go ahead and put this in sport mode. The exhaust baffles open up. And let's see what this got. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Jeez. That took me by surprise there for a second. I drove it around prior to this filming, but that was quite a surprise. I wasn't expecting that kind of shove immediately. All right, so now I'm gonna go into second. And let's see, from second. Little bit of lag there. Oh, wow, this thing accelerates at a frantic pace. Wow. It's right around the 3,500 range when it really wakes up and starts moving unbelievably. Oh, it's relentless. The G-forces give you a little bit of lightheadedness. This thing is truly remarkably fast. Wow. You just gotta hang on. Wow. Jeez, oh my goodness. Wow. This is like electric car type of performance. Actually, the right word is acceleration. This is electric car type of acceleration, and it is really remarkable. But I will say this. The power delivery is exactly like the Carrera S, or the Carrera S motor, the 3-liter. And what I mean by that is that motor gives you a gut punch right around 3,500–4,000 RPM, and it just starts pulling. This is the same, it's just a harder gut punch. Actually, it's much harder, and you really just have to hold on. It's so good that this is a PDK. I would find it hard to drive this much power with a manual and this much acceleration, and the way this car grips and just pulls you forward. It's truly remarkable. Now, as far as the PDK goes, it's absolutely wonderful. Whether you're doing it manually using the paddles or whether it's doing it automatically, which is even more impressive because it's almost like reading your mind. When you put it in sport mode, it'll downshift for you when you're going around the corner, and it just works so nicely. There's a reason why the PDK is the benchmark for all double clutch transmissions, and that's what I compare every double clutch to. I get in one, how does it feel like compared to the PDK? So it just continues that wonderful reputation that it has in the Turbo S. I'm going to put it back in normal mode here. I'm going to talk about the steering and the suspension. So the steering is actually razor sharp. Any type of input you give it, it is going in that direction. There is no deadness in this steering wheel. Now, when you put it in sport mode, it gets even tighter and even sportier. Of course, that's to be expected. But the level of sportiness that you gain is actually quite surprising. Whether you're in sport mode here and then you turn on the PDCC, or you put the PDCC into sport mode, it really buttons it down. Yes, the ride gets stiffer, but the level more straight. Oh man. And the exhaust pops in sport mode. I forgot to mention that. You don't get that in normal, but when you're in sport mode, the exhaust definitely pops much more. I remember driving the 991 Turbo S, and it didn't pop as much as this. So Porsche definitely is paying more attention to the turbo's exhaust note, because I know some people complained about that. But going back to the suspension. So the suspension in PDCC, when you put a PDCC in sport, you can definitely feel it doing some magic with the body, because it really buttons it down and reduces body roll and just body motions in general. And it's really fighting to keep it as flat as it can, even when you're driving in the city. Now, as far as the brakes goes, carbon ceramics, fantastic carbon ceramic brakes, a lot of bite right at the top of the pedal, sensitive brake pedal, exactly what I want when I'm driving a sports car, and this does not disappoint. Now, since I'm in normal mode and since people drive this on a daily basis, let me give you some perspective on how that feels. So I'm driving in downtown LA where the streets are not the best. Actually, they would probably be below average. And the magic of the Turbo S is coming out. And I'm not sure if Porsche tunes this differently, but this feels more comfortable than the other 992s that I've driven. So I've driven the base, I've driven the 4S, I've driven coupes, I've driven cabriolets, I've driven the GTS, and this feels much more comfortable than any other 911 I've driven. I don't know if it's because of the 14-way seat, but I can tell you that this is the most comfortable riding 911 I have driven, or 992 911 that I have driven. So that goes to the daily drivability, and now I understand why people buy these and drive them on a daily basis, because they're actually quite comfortable. I mean, the seat is fantastic, and then the suspension, even though it is properly sporty, it does a good job of trying to hide that sportiness or disguise it when you're driving in the street at a slow pace or at city speed pace. Now, this car is not perfect, so two shortcomings I thought of for it. Number one, the engine and the power delivery are not as engaging to drive as a high revving motor, at least for me. Second, it's a coupe, but you could pretty much only fit two people in here. So if you can get past those two things, then this is an absolutely remarkable car, even at its very expensive price point. So that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna drive it for a little bit longer and then take it back and feel sad about taking it back. But if you have any other questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.